world either by the sword or by the word, and that is what is now being inflicted upon our civilization, because we now have global travel. We're in a global world now, so the jihad has gone global.
Right. Well, I agree with you 100%. I just see that the response that our governments, whether it's the United States, whether it's the United Kingdom, whether it's France, whether it's Sweden, Australia, New Zealand, that there seems to be a blindness or some kind of just an unbelievable darkness over the eyes of our political leaders that can't seem to see the crux of the matter, as you have explained, that Islam wants to dominate, it wants to convert the world by violence if necessary. And so that, to me, seems to be the bigger problem and the more perplexing problem than rather Islam itself. It almost seems like if the world was united and we understood the threat of Islam, that they don't have the military power to try to face the West. Probably any individual European country, and certainly the United States, England, any of these countries could easily defeat the Muslims on the battlefield, as Israel has proven many times in these past 25 years or so. But how are we going to, just a rhetorical question before, I wanted to get a little bit more into just you, Lionheart, a little bit about your background and how you were growing up and so forth. But later on maybe we can discuss how we view this dilemma, this crazy situation with our Western governments actually, instead of going after the Muslims, are going after the good citizens that are bringing this issue to the forefront. It's absolutely incredible. It's probably unprecedented in history. But let me begin by, or continue by, if you don't mind sharing with me, as I'm getting to know you a little bit better, and with the listeners of this program, if you could just share a little bit about just your background. How old are you? Where were you born? I mean, if you want to share these things, you don't have to get into any detail. How were you raised, if your family life, and that type of thing?
Before I come on to that, the way you talk about the governments being blinded to this, the political elite live in a different world to the everyday man on the street. They don't see what's going on the street because they don't live on the street. They don't experience life on the street. They experience life in the halls of power, in their opulence and in the riches of what they receive from their positions of power within society. They don't know what's befalling the streets of Great Britain, because they don't live there. People like me and other people throughout the country, the people that live on the streets, we're the ones facing this problem face on, because the streets is the front line in this war, and it's a guerrilla war. Like you said, yes, militarily we could defeat them on the battlefields, but warfare has always progressed. It's progressed from swords and spears to muskets at dawn to ships and planes. We're now living in what I view as fourth generation warfare, guerrilla warfare, where your enemy is your next door neighbour. Then one day they wake up and go and blow themselves up on a train. The London bombers.
Right.
One of them was a teacher. They was all British citizens that people said. Well, a better example is the doctors, the failed car bombing in London, in Glasgow. They were NHS doctors working in the British hospital. They were working in the British hospital, and their colleagues were saying these are the nicest people you could ever meet. But then one day these people woke up and tried killing many women and people in Glasgow airport. So that's the enemy we face. We face an enemy that we can't see, an enemy that blends into our societies. They don't need to be fighting on a battlefield. All they need is, at worst case scenario, a suitcase nuke, tied to their back, walking into a major city in America or Great Britain.
Exactly. Right.
And the government have targeted someone like me because I speak out against the Islamification of my country and the Islamification of my community.
You're just
and the
speaking
actual
the
threat.
truth. correct? You're just getting the truth about what Islam is, straight from the Quran, straight from Muhammad, and so how can anybody dispute that?
Yeah, but it upsets their community cohesion, because they're trying to force a false community cohesion on people, as if everything's okay and that people like me is an extremist and the Muslims are just extremists. They don't look at fundamental beliefs within the Quran, the teachings of jihad, the teachings of the global caliphate. You know, all these kind of, like the Dar al-Harb, House of War, Dar al-Islam. You know, they're not looking at these kind of fundamental truths of what we're actually facing. So it's easy to target someone like me and then use me as a sacrifice to appease the Islamic kingdom, you know, as if, well, look, yeah, we're arresting your people, but we're also arresting our people too, you know. But at the end of the day, I've not incited for anyone to commit acts of violence. I've not committed anyone to commit murder or anything like that. All I have done is written the truth about Islam within my community, my country, and in relation to me, you know. These people, they're threatening my life. These people want to kill me, you know. If you lived on the streets of Luton, you'd realise the severity of the situation. There is hundreds of these well-organised drug-dealing gangs of Pakistani Muslims that are pumping heroin and crack out, you know, that's funding their jihad. It's funding their dominance and supremacy upon the streets. They actually control the ground on the streets, you know, in a guerrilla war. You know, they are a paramilitary force on the streets of my community. My community, they declared war against Great Britain on 7/7. Then bombers, the 4 bombers travelled to Luton that morning. They met people within Luton that day, and then they travelled into London and then blew up the 3 trains and the bus. So Osama bin Laden and his leaders, wherever they are in this world today, set that in place within my community, in my country. Another was Operation Crevice, which is the biggest security operation in British history. That centred on Luton again. The emir of the plot, which was a fertiliser plot, was the same Pakistani Muslim that recruited Mohammed Sadiq Khan, leader of the 7/7 bombers. The actual bomb maker was another Pakistani Muslim from the Luton community, and he actually wanted to buy a dirty bomb from the Russian mafia to detonate on the streets of Britain. You know, so that gives you a bit of an understanding of the links to Al-Qaeda terrorism where I come from. You know, these aren't lone individuals. These are actually, you know, part of a wider group. You know, and then beyond that, you've got the society, the daily workings of that society, and how that is then interacting with wider society, the wider non-Muslim society. It's an abomination for Muslims to be ruled over by non-Muslims. And on the streets, they have actually, you know, enforced their dominance and supremacy on the wider society, community, through threats of violence and violence itself. You know, there's always cases of murder and shootings and stabbings and robberies and stuff like that, you know, and that's just all part and parcel of the jihad, to just enforce their supremacy over the infidel, which is obviously me and you and anyone that doesn't believe in Islam.
Right. Well, when did you first become aware, consciously aware of this problem? Obviously, there's been an Islamic or a Muslim presence in England going back quite a few years, and I don't get the impression that you're too old a gentleman like myself, perhaps. And when did you first kind of become aware of this? How did you get involved in this issue?
I've always known about, because I've lived in my community, grown up on the streets, I know what goes on. So I've always lived and known the situation with regards to the Pakistani Muslim community of Luton. I've always known that they control things, you know, and that they work in big gangs, and they've enforced their dominance upon society even when I was growing up, you know, 12, 13, 14. And then you know, the older you get, the more you learn and see, you know, and it's a fact. What I say is a fact on the streets. They have enforced my community to be in fear and to be petrified, really, of them. But when I had my conversion experience back